Take that back to your Senate. Tell them you and that broken stick is all that's left of the garrison of Rome. Tell them we want nothing from Rome. Nothing. Except our freedom!
Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1960s Spartacus, starring Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier, Gene Simmons and Tony Curtis, mostly directed by Stanley Kubrick, which we'll discuss. It's the story of a slave who became a gladiator and a gladiator who defied an empire.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
But not that one. This is a film that was made 40 years before Ridley Scott's epic and was not only a hit for its star Kirk Douglas at the height of his powers, but an important turning point in the career of Stanley Kubrick, who would move to England after making this, where he would spend his career making movies away from the interference of Hollywood. A couple of them you may have heard of. Here, though, he fashioned a movie of truly epic scale, released at the dawn of a new decade, but as the sun was setting on the huge spectacle historical epic. Something else we'll discuss. A true star vehicle for Kirk Douglas. This is still chock full of outrageous acting talent with the kind of large-scale, tactile filmmaking that modern technology has relegated to history. Now, Kubrick disowned it. Its production was a nightmare, it's overly dramatic, and it's far too long, and it's fantastic. Let's take a look. So, the production stories that surround Spartacus are legendary and could fill several videos, but for the sake of this review, I'll just quite briefly say that Anthony Mann was kicked off the project very early on and replaced, at Kirk Douglas's request, by filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, who Kirk had made Paths of Glory with. By now, though, Douglas was a megastar and he clashed with Kubrick throughout the shoot, a shoot that lasted almost 2 years and chewed through an, at the time, massive $12 million. So, more importantly, what's the finished product like? Well, massive for a start. This is an afternoon swallowing 3-hour 20-minute movie complete with overture and intermission, an epic to stand alongside the Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur and Cleopatra. It sees Kirk Douglas's Thracian slave Spartacus toiling away in the mines of Libya when he is bought by Peter Ustinov's slave trader and gladiator school Batiatus, and it's here that Spartacus learns the ways of the gladiator along with his fellow prisoners, including a great cameo from the great Woody Strode. And it's also here in Gladiator School that he has his loins stirred by servant girl Varinia, played by the astonishing Gene Simmons. Now, before you can say Laurence Olivier arrives with his cohort and demands to see a battle to the death. Now, this doesn't go down too well with everyone, as you can imagine. Worse still, Olivier pinches Varinia for himself, and that's the last straw for Spartacus and co, who decide it's time for a revolt. It's exciting stuff, well shot, and you can really cheer on the makeshift slave army as they tear down the cages and fences and take back their freedom. Now, the middle part of the film switches back and forth between Spartacus going on a 7-month rampage of looting the Italian Peninsula, making deals to buy ships from pirates so he can get his new army out of the country. Now, this is all interweaved with the intrigues and power struggles inside the Senate, with the slippery and sly Senator Gracchus, an excellent Charles Laughton, being in favour of the Republican form of rule, and Laurence Olivier's Marcus Crassus looking to form a dictatorship, with him in charge, naturally.
I promise the living body of Spartacus, for whatever punishment you may deem fit, that or his head. This I vow by the spirits of all my forefathers.
Now, there's much toing and froing in the Senate and sneaky side deals made in opulent bathhouses that include John Gavin's Julius Caesar, who looks in better shape than anyone in the Roman or slave armies. Anyway, if you're here for political machinations and the power plays of the Roman Senate, that's great, but my guess is that most will tune in for some big-scale epic action, and that's one of the things that Spartacus excels at. This, of course, was the age when those big-budget spectacles were trying to outdo each other with how much action they could cram onto the screen. Much of this is still astonishing to this day. The pre-CGI organisation that it must have taken to show these huge Roman army formations moving across the battlefields is impressive. Thousands of extras and thousands of horses. We get some great old-school gore also, I'm sure, which is quite jarring in places. Anyway, yeah, I can't talk about this film and not draw attention to the aftermath of a key battle that results in captured slaves being asked to identify their slave army leader. It's an iconic scene that even people who've not sat through the film will most probably be familiar with.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
So yeah, Spartacus delivers on that epic action. Good old swords and shields and spears and mass death. But like I mentioned, this was a Kirk Douglas project, a star vehicle if ever there was one, and Douglas wanted Spartacus to be more than a warrior, more than a revolutionary. What old Kirk wanted was something as close to a Christ-like figure as you could get without actually being called Jesus. Now, the real Spartacus, the film is very loosely based on, led his slave army around 72 BC. So this is, I would argue, the most famous of Kirk Douglas's many film roles, the one most people will know him from. He had a hell of a career, one of the greatest in cinema, making about 90 movies between 1946 and 2008. Douglas died in 2020. Here, probably much to Kubrick's frustration, he has about 200 close-ups, looking chiselled and tanned, even hung on a cross in the burning sun. Now, as much as I do love Kirk Douglas, the film Spartacus secretly belongs to Charles Laughton and Peter Ustinov, who won Best Supporting Actor here. I genuinely believe the two of them decided between them that they were in a completely different movie and look like they're having fun amongst the senatorial seriousness of it all.
In spite of your vices, you are the most generous Roman of our time.
Vices? Ladies, since when are they a vice?
Oh, perhaps I used the wrong word. No, an eccentricity, a foible. I hope I pronounced that word.
Now, of course, 6.5 decades after the fact, the film does show its age a little. It is sluggish and could have done with at least 30 minutes chopped from it. I think at one point it was released in a shorter form with some violence removed and a particular scene that's passed into cinema legend between Laurence Olivier and Tony Curtis's manservant Antoninus. Audiences and censors of the time unable to accept the fact that Olivier's Crassus openly announced his bisexuality, even if he does have to dress it up a little in a story about snails and oysters.
My taste includes both snails and oysters.
So considering Kubrick was brought in as a hired hand, he still insisted on reworking the script constantly during filming, desperately trying to mould this enormous tale into something more meditative and Kubrickan. Of course, at this stage, he had no final control over the script and clashed constantly with his star. Now, it served cinema well as he fled the studio system to get the control that he craved, and born from it were classic movie monoliths such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, Barry Lyndon and The Shining. Now, if the Swords and Sandals epic wasn't over in 1960, it was certainly in its death throes when in 1963, Cleopatra cost 20th Century Fox a fortune in losses, and the aptly titled Fall of the Roman Empire struggled under the weight of its $16 million budget. It would take another 36 years and Ridley Scott and Russell Crowe to reignite cinemagoers' interests. Now, with a passionate star, a cast of acting royalty and a director pushing himself under studio constraints, Spartacus is must-see cinema, and even though it doesn't always get the balance right with its blend of heroic sacrifice, political intrigue, romance and massive battle action, Spartacus was a huge success, the highest grossing film of the year, a scooper of 4 Oscars and one of the most influential slices of epic cinema yet seen. Go check it out.
It can't just be a gang of drunken raiders.
What else can we be?
Gladiators. An army of gladiators. There's never been an army like that.